Imagine a massive, invisible wall.
Okay.
On one side, you have the physical borders of a nation state. Flags, customs officers, maps drawn maybe 100 years ago.
Right, the traditional boundaries.
Exactly. And on the other side, you have digital code. Fluid, borderless, moving at the speed of light. And right now, there's this massive friction point where these two realities are just crashing into each other.
They really are. And that crash isn't just some temporary glitch. It is actively defining the future of global economics.
It's the point where you are starts to fight with what you know.
That's a great way to put it.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're continuing our journey through the AI Futures series by Jafar Humayun.
Yes, specifically we are unpacking episode 21, which is titled The Protectionist Paradox.
Right. And for anyone joining us just now, we should probably set the stage. We've been covering a lot of ground in this series.
We have, and I think the most important thing to remember about Humayun's work, and I really can't stress this enough, is the framing.
The framework, yeah.
Exactly. He explicitly states right at the beginning that AI Futures is not a forecast, it's a framework.
Meaning we aren't here to predict stock prices.
No, not at all. We aren't guessing which tech giant wins the race. This is about analyzing systems.
So if you are tuning in for, hot stock tips or a bet on the next tech trillionaire, this isn't that deep dive.
Definitely not. This is about the mechanics of how society, technology, and governance interact.
It's about physics, not the weather report. Let's do a quick recap to orient ourselves. In our previous installment, episode 20, The Erosion of the Social Contract, we looked at the people.
And that was a pretty heavy discussion.
It was. We analyzed the psychological friction of professional displacement. We talked about how meritocracy was decoupling from market necessity.
Right, it was very human-centric. It explored what it actually feels like to live through this shift, waking up in a world where your hard-earned skills might suddenly be depreciating assets.
But today we are pivoting. If episode 20 was about the individual, episode 21 is about the state.
We're looking at regulators, governments, and this concept Humayun calls the late-stage regulatory impulse.
And our mission for this deep dive is to understand why symbolic bans on external AI infrastructure often function as a signal of structural unreadiness rather than a strategic safeguard.
Hence the title, The Protectionist Paradox.
It sounds like a spy novel, but it is purely economic policy. And I want to agree right up front, just like the source material does, we are keeping this analytical.
Highly analytical. This is not a critique of government intent.
Right, we aren't calling anyone good or bad here.
No, we're examining reactive versus proactive policy. We want to see what happens when a state pulls a specific regulatory lever. Does it actually stop the machine, or does it just break the handle?
I love that image. Break the handle. Okay, let's unpack section 1. The first major concept is something called the last-minute barrier.
Yes, and this is entirely about the timing of protectionist intervention.
Because it always seems to happen late.
Exactly. The source argues that by the time governments move to restrict or wall off external AI, the dependency is already embedded.
It's not just, oops, we missed a deadline.
No, we're talking about deep structural integration. I think a common misconception is that AI is just like a chatbot on a website.
Right, people think you can just block the URL and you're safe.
Far from it. Humayun points out that AI is currently in the supply chains, it's running logistics, optimizing support centers, and powering design labs.
It's basically become the operating system of the economy.
That's the perfect term, the operating system.
The analogy from the notes that really stuck with me was electricity. Trying to ban foreign AI now is like trying to ban electricity after you've already wired every house and built the grid.
It's a fantastic analogy. If you try to unplug that operating system, once those specific API architectures are running your banking and your shipping, you aren't creating a shield.
What are you creating?
You're creating a systemic bypass.
A systemic bypass. That sounds, well, it sounds like a bad medical term.
It's serious operational friction. You aren't stopping the flow of information to protect yourself. You're just short-circuiting your own infrastructure's ability to process anything efficiently.
So the government steps up and says, we are banning this foreign model to protect our sovereignty. But they might actually be pulling the plug on the tools their local industries need to survive.
That is the core of the paradox. And it leads to a really fascinating distinction between sovereignty as a goal and sovereignty as a capability.
Break that down for me.
Well, every nation wants sovereignty, right? They want control over their destiny. That's a completely legitimate goal.
Yeah.
But A sudden ban in this specific technological context is often a glaring signal that they lack the capability to maintain that control.
So the ban is saying we can't compete with this, so we just had to outlaw it.
Yes. It's an attempt to reclaim control over a system that's already running the show. It signals fear rather than foresight.
Mm.
If you had the capability, if you had domestic infrastructure that was equally powerful, you wouldn't ban the competitor. You'd just outcompete them.
Which brings us directly to the logic of isolation. Let's play this scenario out. A country puts up the wall. They mandate a restriction on external intelligence. What actually happens on the ground?
The source outlines several unintended consequences, starting with what Humayun calls the substitute deficit.
Substitute deficit, like running out of sugar and using salt.
Essentially, yes. The core problem is blocking external models in nations that do not have domestic hyperscale compute or their own sovereign large language models.
Because building those isn't just writing code. You need massive data centers, specialized chips, billions in capital. Most countries just don't have that sitting around.
They don't. So if you ban the global high-tier tool and you don't have a local equivalent, you force your domestic economy into operational stalling.
Operational stalling, so local firms just lose their momentum.
They lose competitive parity entirely. Imagine Firm A operates in a country with open access. They use the most advanced cognitive tools to predict market trends and write software. Now imagine Firm B in a country where those tools are banned. Firm B isn't just a little slower, they are functionally obsolete, denied access to high-tier cognitive tools.
It's like bringing an abacus to a supercomputer fight.
Exactly. And it gets messier. The source details the retaliatory cycle.
Ah, the geopolitics.
Right. We have to stop thinking of AI as standalone software. It's an interconnected global web. If a nation blocks a major global model, they risk digital frostbite.
Digital frostbite.
Meaning they might lose access to the broader ecosystem, cloud tools, specialized chips, trade agreements tied to digital commerce.
So it's not just losing a chatbot, it's a potential entry point into competitive isolation.
Yes. And while this political maneuvering happens, we have to look at capital behavior. Humayun writes, and this is a great quote, "Capital has no flag."
Capital has no flag. It sounds very mercenary, but it makes sense.
Multinationals don't stay and argue with strict regulations. They restructure. If regulations get too tight, the R&D centers and the tax bases simply flow to an ecosystem with less regulatory asymmetry.
So by trying to protect the local economy with a ban, you chase away the investment you need to actually build a local economy.
Precisely. It signals unpredictability. Capital sees that and moves elsewhere.
Okay, if the consequences are this severe operational stalling, digital frostbite, capital flight, why do policymakers pull this lever? This brings us to reaction versus reinvention.
This is a critical distinction in the framework. Humayun notes a consistent choice of reaction over reinvention.
Reaction being the ban. So what does reinvention look like?
Reinvention is structural adaptation. It's long-term reskilling, workforce transition funding, building a true economic paradigm shift. It's the hard work.
But that's slow and, frankly, complicated to put on a campaign flyer.
And that is exactly why the source points to political survival incentives. Symbolic legislation like a ban offers high-visibility headlines. You can stand at a podium and declare you've protected the nation.
While structural economic restructuring
Is painfully slow and complex. It might take a decade to show results. In a political cycle, a decade is an eternity.
It's the difference between slapping a bandage on a broken leg so it looks treated versus doing 6 months of physical therapy.
Right. And there's another layer, the knowledge gap. There is massive information asymmetry in the policymaking class.
Meaning the bureaucrats don't actually understand the mechanics of what they are regulating.
In many cases, yes. They are, as the text puts it, legislating for votes, not viability.
And just to reiterate our tone guardrails here, we are not saying this is malicious.
Absolutely not. It is purely an information asymmetry problem. It's hard to regulate a system you don't fully comprehend. If a regulator thinks AI is just an app, a ban seems reasonable. If they realize it's the new electricity, the ban looks absurd.
So we've covered the ban and the incentives behind it. Let's look at the fallout. Section 4 deals with the feedback of friction. What are the measurable signals of this forced isolation?
The first glaring signal is brain drain.
We hear that term a lot, but how does it apply specifically here?
In this context, it's the migration of highly skilled minds engineers, researchers to ecosystems that permit AI-integrated work.
Because if you're a top-tier developer, these tools are your livelihood.
Exactly. If you can't use the state-of-the-art tools in your home country, you have to leave. Your career depends on it.
Like a Formula One driver moving to a country that actually allows fast cars.
And once that talent leaves, it's a permanent innovation deficit for the nation. The second signal is the rise of shadow AI.
Shadow AI, that sounds like some kind of cyberpunk black market.
It essentially is a black market, and it's highly risky. If official, monitored channels are closed, people don't stop using AI. The marketing manager still needs copy, the coder still needs to debug.
They just do it quietly.
Right. They use VPNs, they access unregulated endpoints, they paste sensitive corporate data into unvetted third-party wrappers just to meet their deadlines.
Wow. So the ban actually makes the environment less secure? It pushes all the usage into the shadows where there's zero oversight?
It creates total opacity. You lose the economic upside of the official tools, but you keep all the security risks of data leakage. It's the worst of both worlds.
And combined with that, we have investor flight.
Yes, capital detests unpredictability. A sudden ban signals regulatory chaos. Investors want stability, so they move to safer harbors.
And the ultimate result of all this friction?
Productivity collapse. Local firms are understaffed and underpowered globally. It leads straight into competitive isolation.
It paints a picture of a nation just slowly dimming economically. Which leads us to the final and maybe most philosophical part of the deep dive, the pride trap and the missing bridge.
This is where Humayun transitions from pure economics to national psychology. He refines the whole concept of protectionism. He writes, "Protectionism isn't a solution, it's a confession."
A confession. What exactly are they confessing?
A confession of unreadiness. It's a public admission that the domestic ecosystem is simply not prepared to compete. By banning the foreign technology, you are admitting you failed to build your own.
And that connects to this idea of the missing bridge.
Yes. The stark realization that the bridge to the AI era wasn't burned by these new regulatory bans.
It was never constructed in the first place.
Exactly. The failure was a lack of early investment in domestic innovation and infrastructure years ago. The ban today is just a symptom of that historical lag.
So when the wave finally hit, they looked around and realized they hadn't built a boat.
Right. And the attempt to protect economic dignity by banning the wave actually accelerates the decay. The economic model they are trying to protect is already obsolete.
You're defending a ghost? The source says you cannot ban a paradigm shift.
You really can't. AI isn't just a product line. It's a fundamental shift in how value is generated. By the time a ban is signed into law, AI has likely already replaced the administrative roles that would have tracked the ban's enforcement.
The automation outpaces the bureaucracy. So the choice isn't really to ban it or allow it.
No, the real choice is between structural adaptation, doing the hard work to thrive in the new reality, or strategic decoupling.
Strategic decoupling.
Which is a polite way of saying you are defending a hollow structure. You're maintaining the facade of an old economy while the rest of the globe moves on.
It forces you to look at national pride through a very different lens. Is that pride serving the country, or is it blinding it?
That is the pride trap. It's when the symbol of control, the ban, the border, becomes more important than actual capability.
So what's the synthesis for you, the listener, trying to make sense of these constant regulatory headlines?
The main takeaway is that restricting access without a viable domestic alternative creates a strategic mismatch. It does not save the economy, it accelerates its decline. You can't hide from a structural shift. You have to build the capacity to integrate it.
You can't stop the tide with a broom. You have to learn to swim.
Or build a boat. But standing on the shore, passing laws against the water, rising is not a strategy. It's a paradox.
A provocative thought to leave you with today. Sometimes national pride can be the ultimate distraction from structural necessity. Are we cheering for a policy because it genuinely works, or just because it feels patriotic?
That is a hard question we have to ask.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive into episode 21. But the AI Futures Framework is not done yet.
Far from it.
Next up is episode 22, and the title alone is striking. Bread and Circuses.
The tagline for that one is, "When there's nothing left to work for, give them something to watch."
I have a feeling that's going to be intense, going from state regulation to mass distraction.
It's the logical next step. If a state falls into the protectionist paradox and fails to adapt, distraction is the next lever they pull.
We will see you then.
Stay tuned. Stay curious.
So systemic.